Hello folks and welcome back to Philosopheckery. Today I'm lucky enough to be spending some time around the little village on the west coast of Ireland of Cong. Now, Cong has recently been made popular by the show about the Guinnesses. The Guinnesses once owned Ashford Castle here, which is a particularly fine example of a castle. But it's also kind of famous for The Quiet Man. The Quiet Man was filmed here, well, parts of it around here, and there's lots of memorabilia that still remains, Walking around Cong, it's one of the most scenic and beautiful places. Every corner is another beauty spot that you turn around. Every view down the river, every arch of the trees over the pathways through the forested areas. And all the buildings around here are just fit so well into this place. But why am I here? I'm here to talk to a man called Lukasz Krzywan. Now, for over 30 years, Lukasz has wandered the paths of spirituality, meditation, and philosophy, seeking ways to give voice to creativity and a language that touches presence itself. A citizen of the world, naturally an optimist, occasionally melancholic, by choice a rational romantic, author, artist, musician, educator, and father. Born in Poland, now living in Ireland, where he guides others in philosophy, artistic expression, mindfulness, and ecological awareness. Now, as you can see, I read that introduction from the back of his book, Think Poetically, and this might be a leaping off point from my conversation about poetry with the wonderful Lukasz Krzywan. Please join us, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. Thank you. Yeah. Lukasz, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Mahim.
And bringing some of your wisdom here to us. So, you're a philosopher poet, as such, amongst other things.
Yeah, I think the poetical side is kind of a little addition to different arts I always like to explore. So
Okay.
it's
Have you been writing poetry long?
I say that they just come and go. So the little collection that you've read is just collection over the nearly 10 years of just kind of dropping a little poetical thoughts together, and just recently I managed to choose the ones I kind of cherished and put them together, into one little collection.
Is it something personal is it difficult? Are you giving something personal to a poem and then publishing it? Is it a piece of you're putting out there?
Well, definitely that's something that comes straight from within, it's not, I don't think it's like produced so much, it just comes. I think any arts that I ever tried was always a kind of a natural expression. When I remember when I started painting and stuff, I actually saw what the painting should like before I started, so the same thing with the poems, they usually come ready. So I think that's people have different processes of doing art, right? But for me, any of that kind of stuff was always something that it's like, there's a little bit polishing happening, obviously, too, but it's a kind of a balance between the muses coming and taking over and maybe the rational side of things, trying to make it, look right.
I hear artists sometimes when they're doing paintings and they're like, when is it finished? But it's finished when you stop. You know what I mean? It's finished when you walk away from it, when you choose. Is it the same with a poem?
No, I don't think in this case, I remember, now after all these years coming back to some of those texts, so there was sometimes that it was just right, but maybe one word or the way it was put together, or maybe just even the arrangement of words in the page need a little bit of polishing maybe, but but again, painting and poetry is a different medium, so we play differently with those materials.
And you've done both, and you also do music.
Yeah, music is also.
Can you say a little bit about maybe what's the same and what's different amongst those three things?
Well, what's the same for me is that the process is very similar. I kind of hear it, or I see it, or I think it.
Yeah.
It comes. But again, the different aspects of expression, you have to work differently with those mediums. With painting, you have to wait for the paint to dry,
Yeah.
put a new layer. With the music, when you mix, different sounds together, like you have to come back and you have to master it, and you have to put them in the right order. And sometimes you think, oh, I got it right. It's just a bit too much, and you have to strip it down. But that maybe that's similar with the poetry as well. We write things and then but just delete that or make it shorter, sweeter. Yeah.
When you're working on your poem, say you got that poem and you jotted down the first editing, the first draft, does that poem stay with you as you're walking around, as you maybe walk through these beautiful woods we're here at in Kong, and do you play with it in your mind until you find
Yeah, that's how it works. Yeah, I think there's a thought. Like one of the poems is that appeared in the middle of the night. And I just one of these nights that you just suddenly wake up and you can't fall asleep again.
Yeah.
And those words just started adding one to the other, and I became, polishing it there as well. And I think it's one of my favorite poems from this collection. It's about, that's I think one of the first ones. It's in the night silence.
Mind reading it first?
In the night silence, waking up without meaning to, the self is born, and it finds it hard to fall asleep again. Yeah. So it was, just the play with words was one thing, but I think that reflection that, the self that we're walking with every day, the ego or something like that, the moment when I woke up, there was nothing there. And this moment of awareness that this self becomes a thing, that the first thoughts and things start to be and all this discourse happening in the mind. That was the poem was about, that, this is a construct, this ego, this self is a construct, and the noticing of that happening was so vivid in the middle of the night, when there's no distractions, nothing else, and the emptiness of mind is this thing just appearing. Yeah, and I think it comes with the kind of experience of meditation. Start noticing these kind of stuff, which it's that's how they come.
That's really interesting though, and I have read these poems, and I tried to figure out what you're trying to say, and that is really interesting. That moment when you wake up, that the self, the ego that we carry around with us, for just those groggy moments in the morning, it's not there yet.
Yeah, when you wake up, you need a wee or something, and you observe yourself just, doing this thing, but the mind is not full of those things, before you go asleep, fall asleep, you have all these thoughts and kind of trying to close all the processes, and until the mind gives away to the, the complete emptiness, and that within this emptiness, you are becoming awake. And this moment just between those is that where this lies.
That's interesting. That's lovely. And there's such short poems that you write. Like this one is 5 lines, and it's and here we are still talking in many lines and having a conversation about it. Why did you pick this style of poem that it's so short?
But there's two things that I want to say. They actually come ready, so they usually either, sometimes maybe I need to add a few words to it or something, but they just come ready like this. But there is some, I think it says on the back of the book, short in words, fast in presence. So I'm trying to use the words, if I have to polish it, because when they come like this. But, sometimes there's too much, and you strip it down to just the play of words, to bring that presence, to bring that emotional response, or kind of reflective response. And I think that's what's happening with, koans, or what you call haiku in the Japanese. They're very short little things. they express a movement or a feeling or an idea or a thought, something that you notice.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it all goes back to kind of Buddhism, mindfulness, and this kind of, you know, Zen, that you notice this fleeting something. And I don't think that long poems would do that. I was always bored by long poems too, and, you know, the kind of more pathetic, uh, I suppose poetry was never really touching me so much. And those little, I think it's just a form that stays with me, and, you know, you can reflect on them.
Is it to me, and I heard this when I was kind of showing the difference between kind of Chinese and Asian art and European and Western art. And European and Western art, if you get a picture, they have tried to fill every single part of that frame, of that picture. But then in Asian and Chinese art, it's often done with this one stroke, and it's the space around it, and it's the space between the art and the perceiver that actually creates that whole art. Yeah. Rather than it just being thrown at you like we do in the West.
It's an interesting observation, yeah.
But is that something that kind of lands with you, that what you're trying to do is just outline the space for people to enter, and then it's theirs, it's their imagination that creates the perception?
Yeah, no, I'm trying to, I think when I say because they just appear like that, I think whatever try to express to me, just try to capture something like this and give it to you to reflect on it, you know. And if I put too much on it, it's just going to be too complicated to reflect upon, you know.
Yeah.
And also, I think in the meditative practices like mindfulness, you know, the mind comes down and it's empty, you know, in whatever way empty mind can look like. But, you know, those thoughts become very vivid, and there's not that many of them when the mind comes down. And I think this has the same quality, that there's a thought or idea or reflection or insight in that moment, and then it fleets away, and maybe there's another one. So yeah, I just like the presentation. And you can see the layout of the little book is also an empty page with a little thing in the middle. So that's, I think it speaks to, I think I like the, you know, I was always inspired by Asian cultures and studied them since I was like a teenager. So I think it influenced me as well in that way, you know?
Yeah. I've heard someone say as well, a poem is like a picture. It's not telling you a whole story. It's just giving you a snapshot. And the rest you can read into it yourself. Like, you know, if you see someone laughing in a picture, you know there's something funny going on. You might not know what it is. And then it gives you the space to think what might be funny.
Yeah, I think there's a question when we spoke before. You said, like, what does a poem do? You know, what does poetry do to us? So I was thinking about that, and there's something about it's a bit like a signpost on a map of your internal self. You know, like, I have experienced something, so that's what it looked like. So I'm putting a sign, and you can point something in you on your internal landscape to find that place. Maybe discover something new, maybe something you've experienced as well. Like we've experienced love and loneliness, and, you know, maybe that mindful moment or something. So these are the signposts that's why maybe poetry, some works better with others. And, you know, you like one kind of poetry or one kind of poem because it's signposts you, it's something that is familiar. But then again, sometimes you read a poem that, you know, surprises you, takes you, but you discover something new. So I kind of think that's what I'm trying to do with my poetry maybe as well, is that they're pointing their own internal landscape to a place. Look, visit there, you know?
Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. Because you're not showing them what that place is. You're just saying, I think it's over there somewhere.
You see, I cannot know what it is.
Yeah.
And again, what poetry does, there is, you know, from kind of more philosophical perspective, there is that problem of, you know, how science describes things and philosophy describes things, and poetry describes things. And you know that the classical problem of the taste of strawberry, right? Like, I can, you know, science can describe, you know, what kind of enzymes and things are taking place, but it cannot really tell you what the strawberry tastes like. And the same with the poem. I cannot exactly give you my experience, what I can point out on your internal map of experiences, where to go to find that little thing. And, you know, it's a bit like, you know, here's the field of strawberries, just place it yourself, you know,
Yeah.
something like that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. I had this kind of idea when I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about what is poetry and maybe where does it lie. I came up with this. You have analytical philosophy, which is really analytical language. Everything means a particular thing, and you know the semantics are nailed on. Then you have continental philosophy, where the language is a bit looser, and there's aphorisms involved, and it's almost poetic. Then you have poetry, and then on the other side of that you have song, and then you have just plain music. So there seems to be kind of something running through there, and poetry lands right in the middle for me. So song is just pure music. There is no words. You still create feeling. Or music is just pure music. There is no words. Song then adds words and it gives it more depth. And then poetry is just words without the music. Continental philosophy is still just words, but the words aren't necessarily outlined in strict ways. You know what I mean? The meaning is kind of still varied, or you can play with it a bit. And then analytical philosophy is like scientific language.
Yeah.
Do you see something in that, or could you speak to that? Do you think it lies there somewhere?
Well, I like to point out about continental philosophy, because that's how a lot of in the history of philosophy, of one philosopher using some, I don't know, Hegel maybe would have was ideas that are hard to read, you know, and obviously has something, he knew what he wants to say, but you know, you have people arguing about what he was actually saying afterwards, because it wasn't really, you know, that's that kind of looseness of language. But I was thinking about, you know, how language, where we get the language from. Obviously, there's the whole involvement with language over thousands of years and whatnot. But if you think about analytical philosophy and consonant, it comes with a dictionary, right? And where does the dictionary come from? The dictionary comes from either from like the folklore and the way we people every day use their language, but also from literature, which is mostly poetry that, you know, we have surviving. So every dictionary would look at where that word appeared in which poem, when, and how it was used, and the meaning is actually retrieved from the context. You know, like a lot of English language from Shakespeare's word, but you know how he used that phrase, and that, oh, that's what it means, or that's what it is. So I think, you know, poetry and literature created a lot of that, how we understand words now. Is it around that?
Okay,
That is interesting, you know.
but there is something interesting around that. Yeah. That how it's used.
So we obviously use the words, some kind of words, but when you try to define them, or you become an analytical philosopher, where would you go? Like, you have to go probably back to how people were using them, you know, what they meant when they were saying, and somebody clarified it for them, and now we're going to clarify it even more, you know. But it starts with that natural use, that, you know, that thing that, you know, we use every day to express something to each other, you know.
Yeah, I like that. Wittgenstein famously said, "Of that which we cannot speak, we should remain silent, and of that which can be said, we should say it clearly." Now, obviously, he was talking about philosophers and philosophy, so it's often thought that what he was saying was, look, all that voodoo mumbo jumbo, we can't talk about it. Maybe it's there, maybe it isn't, but we can't say it clearly, so let's not talk about that. Is poetry a place where that can be talked about?
Yeah, I think it comes back to where, you know, where does poetry come from, really, you know? And for me, it's just it's another play of our brain, creative brains, as we have infused, right? Like, we see things and we just transform them, we play with them, you know, like children do and like adults do too. But I think we do the same with words, and I think the way, you know, poetry comes to me, and sometimes, I think a lot of times, you know, I don't think it's a thing that you can just sit down to write a poem. Obviously, maybe there are people who do this in this way, but there is a moment that takes it to that, and I think that's what happens with poetry. When it becomes a poem, is some intentionality behind it, but in a playful way. So what is a poem? Like there has to be some intentions. I'm putting this into a song or a poem or something. That's going to be a poem, and it wants to express something, and that creativity, expresses in a very unique way. But yeah, the creativity is. I think that's what is at the essence of all these things that we do as humans. Like we process reality, and we have this unique way of just playing.
Yeah.
A bit more like some animals play too, but like we have so many different ways of doing it. Actually, play with words and paints and and sculptures and stone and wood and that's all this architecture. All this that gives us awe. There's probably famous as well internationally. Miron Białoszewski was a Polish poet, and his thing was just playing with words, making up the words, combining words and twisting them around and putting them on different places on pages to make new stuff. And that's what I loved about his poetry, but that's what inspires me as well. That language is a playful thing that you don't have to be analytical about it. You can be playful. So I think that's what poetry does. It doesn't require you to define everything sharply. It's again that signpost to some direction.
Yeah.
Mm.
Is poetry for the privileged? Is one of my questions. When I grew up, I grew up in a family that was very Irish, very rooted in Ireland. There was no poetry. There was sing songs, and poetry might have been looked at like, you what? Do you know what I mean? The friends group I had growing up, if I came along on a Friday night with a poem, it probably would have been the end of my friendships. To such an extent, you would have been looked at differently. But that seems like an aberration in Ireland, or a very unique time in Ireland where poetry wasn't a part of it, because it's such a part of our history. The certain scholars. So then I wonder, is poetry now in Ireland just seen as for the privileged few? Is it the for the high classes, the upper classes, to appreciate on their weekends? Because I don't see it enough, or I don't see it much around just ordinary everyday Joe soaps, which I would like to. I think that's where it's impactful, and that's maybe where it belongs.
Yeah, no, I kind of thought about this series, if that's something for the privileged ones, and I think poetry wasn't always a big part of my life at all. It was, it would you come across mostly at school, made to read certain names, but at the same time, like especially in case of Ireland, like I'm only, I live here 22 years, but I can only know that much about the culture here, but I think that especially the Gaelic, and the Irish culture, like culture of Irish language, the poetry was at the essence of things. It was especially with the kind of colonial past and oppressors, trying to eradicate the language. The language carries the poems of, and as simple as a song about your favorite field in your village to kind of the glorious past, or the love that you survived, and so I think it was never really a privileged thing so much, and you find it in every folklore. You go to Poland into a little village and there'll be songs, and there might not be as Homer style of thing, but it's still the same need for expressing something in a poetical language. So I don't think it really is a privileged one, but I think we just live in a consumeristic society that it's oriented as something else. Even poetry is, you consume it rather than anything else. So,
but it doesn't add anything to
if you cannot sell it, what kind of poet are you?
Yeah,
that's the thing. and that's with everything,
Yeah.
So maybe that's not so much that it is for privileged one, but I think this society is is interested in short bites of consumer goods, really, and yeah, I probably would have. Well, I was surrounded by friends that were artists, so maybe it was easy to come across poetry. But yeah, it wouldn't be necessary everybody's thing.
Yeah, no, definitely wouldn't.
Yeah, and also poetry. Like I suppose the question is poetry a rebellious thing as a rebellious act. I think that's something that we all also wanted to maybe talk about. I don't think it by its nature is not, but it can be very much used in this way. I can't remember where I heard it, but I know that Irish people, when they were trying to arrange a mass or something hiding away from the British, they would change a few words in the language to know if the British are hiding behind a rock, observing who's coming to the mass or not. If there's no one there, nobody knows where it's happening. The song's sound differently, the poem is different.
Yeah.
On the Friday evening, I was even another Friday evening that that people will be there. You cannot meet at the time at the right place,
And that'll be thrown into the
Yeah,
phone.
and also because probably nobody understood what he's saying. It was the way of not only just saying things, but expressing things that would not be able to express any other.
Yeah, it's funny. I went to there was a Palestinian culture night, and the lady that was speaking was saying, because poetry is still quite big in the Arabic world. It's quite revered. I mean, they have the $1 Million Poet competition, and it's a big TV event, and they're still listened to seriously, as if they have something to say, not just pure entertainment. But this Palestinian lady was saying that, they still say poems out loud at night, and in places around there, you could hear somebody just out on the edge of a building just saying poetry. But she said often in that poetry, they are giving you the coordinates of where the Israeli blockades are around the place. Just the same as what you were saying used to happen in Ireland.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like we only 3 weeks ago we played with two beautiful musicians from Iran. And one of these guys is a very accomplished flute player. Ney, I think that's what the instrument is called, traditional bamboo flute, which is also it goes back to the tradition of Rumi, the biggest poet, like famous everywhere, really. And those poems that Rumi wrote are, even just saying them and singing them and speaking them is a rebellious act, because they're not allowed in particular parts of Muslim culture, because they speak of the Sufi tradition, or speaks of God in a different way than some of parts of the Islamic culture. So it was interesting. Like he recorded a beautiful album of music with Rumi's poetry in it, and it wasn't allowed to be published in Iran because it was Rumi, because that particular form. And the other guy played on a sitar. It's a little like a bouzouki kind of instrument that is so beautiful, heart touching. But it was also an act of rebellious to sing poetry with that instrument. And it is so small that you can carry it under your coat and you can put it down together. And it was made so it's quiet enough. So if you have a little gathering of poems and music, you're able to not disturb any neighbors, but you will hear far away. So there was that particular instrument, but that instrument always came with some kind of a poetry around it. It's yeah.
I think I looking into Iran recently, and so many musical instruments came from Iran. I heard somewhere that actually the bagpipes were first made in Iran. Don't tell the Scottish people; they will not be happy. But
I haven't heard that.
No, it's
it's such
super interesting.
It's the roots of our civilization.
Yeah,
a lot of stuff.
Yeah. I'm trying to steer away from politics now, so I'm not.
Yeah, let's not do politics.
There's so much
too
we
much
can
of
say
it.
there. Yeah, there's so much we can say. The name of your book is Thinking Poetically.
Yeah.
What is it to think poetically?
Yeah. So I think the title was supposed to be kind of a way. It sounds better in Polish, because when you say it all together, it's Lukasz Krzywan, which is me, is thinking poetically. So that
Okay.
it's
So it adds you there.
yeah.
I'm thinking.
So because it's thinking poetically, right?
Yeah.
But I think that something for me, thinking poetically is comes naturally, as I said, the kind of poems, like things appear to me as they are sometimes, but there's some kind of reflective part. That's what makes things poetic, maybe, you know. And intentionality is that we want to think about things in a different way, but also kind of reflective on life, you know. Something like, you know, who would be interested in thinking about, you know, how self is a construct which appeared in the middle of the night. Like it's, you know, you could write a book on, you know, analytical philosophy, what the self is and how ego becomes, and hire neuroscientists and to see where the, you know, the what's the default network, you know, happens and all this kind of stuff. You can do that, but that little poem, you know, it just shows you that moment. So that's what I'm interested in when I think poetically, right? So
Okay.
to do the signposting rather than explain things, you know.
So when something happens or when you notice something about the world, about yourself or whatever, maybe would it be right to say to think poetically is how can I signpost this in like 5 words? Like what you said there, you could write books on it. You could have
Yeah, but like,
neuroscientists
look,
that say
I go
five
to gym now and then,
lines.
you know, and do the little circuits, you know, with a couple of lads here in Kong. And, you know, I was on the tread one day. I was like, you know, it's like with life, you know, you keep on running and running and running. And one day it just, you know, that's it. It's the last run, you know. And so there was one poem at the very end of the book about the treadmill, you know, the last time you just, there's this little movement at the end that says,
I want people to experience your poetry too. So if you wouldn't mind reading it before you say it.
So treadmill is called, running toward death, relentless, too fast, it's slow, intervals until I become an ancestor. So just those short words that, you know, again, signpost things like what's the direction of the run. It's obviously, and relentless is something that's just, you know, you can't really escape it. You kind of have to keep going. Um, it seems too fast because, you know, when you're growing older, like, we are in a good spot yet, I think, but, you know, you kind of get to the place where you think, you know, it's gonna sooner or later we'll run out of time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's slow because sometimes, you know, when you're in pain or, you know, something is very boring, it's taking forever. And the intervals, you know, it's like sometimes you have to do so much and then you have to take a break. It's like on the circuits, on the intervals, on the gym, you know, you keep going to, and until you become an ancestor, so you know, some of those only in memories, you know,
Yeah.
and
Someone
what you
else's
leave
memory.
behind, you know.
That's beautiful.
That's kind
That's
of the
beautiful.
intention behind this particular one. Yeah.
Is there a, you mentioned there that it means thinking poetically kind of means something different in Polish, and I know I'm not an Irish speaker myself, but I am related to Irish speakers, and I know Irish speakers, and there's a different way of speaking in Irish too. I mean, if you say to say I'm depressed in Irish, apparently it's like sadness is on me. It's not in me; it's on me. I've got to shake it off, kind of. But is it the same translating from Polish to English? Are you losing something? Is it different?
Yeah, I think some things do not work same with the same weight. Doesn't have they don't carry the same weight? Maybe it depends on the translation. And listen, you know, I'm not a translator by profession, but so I hired, you know, artificial intelligence to help me with that. But it was interesting because, like, they're experts in you know, language models and the way things are expressed. So it was very helpful to run through different versions of how that sound. Does it express the same thing? And maybe some expressions in English I might not know that actually, you know, that might be useful to use it here. There's very little I had to change in a way. Some of them, because they're short, can be translated. Some didn't work that well, you know. Yeah, so I didn't. There's one poem called psychedelic. So when you translate it psychedelic, it's you know, and then for a drug or something like that. But there is in Poland when you say lyric means a lyrical poem. So psychedelic is a play of words that represent a poem about psychedelics. Right?
Okay.
And this is the shortest poem there. I think it is. It's and again, it's just an observation of
I have it here. I love this actually. Yeah, it was actually.
So
And you
awakened.
spelled it at the end with a K.
Yeah, because that's the Polish thing,
I was thinking.
That's why I preserved the K, but awakened eyes and busted trousers.
I love that because that really does give you a picture of something. Awakened eyes.
Yeah.
It really kind of expresses this guy has seen things that I haven't. Or,
But sometimes I like psychedelics are long past for me now. But if it was that thing that you went through things in nature or somewhere. And you had dirty trousers because you've been through bushes and looking at trees or whatever you were doing. But the eyes were so full of the experience of being kind of awake to nature, to new sounds and smells and visions and all this kind of stuff. That's all this kind of simple observation.
I think that was one of my favorite poems out of the whole book, was that, because it spoke to me as well. Psychedelic is how I read it because of the K. And awakened eyes and dusty trousers. It just says it so much. It's there's another very famous, well, not very famous, probably to me, because I idolized the man growing up, was Muhammad Ali. And after his title was stripped, he was out of college, I think, and he was giving a speech, and they were asking for more and more and more and more. So he said something like, I'll say a very short poem. And he said, me, we. And that was the end of his poem. I thought but he still said a lot with those two words, me and we.
Well, you see, that's the space that I'm trying to sometimes find. It's that, I have to connect those two dots, and that leaves so much space, and that's why it's so powerful,
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm being overwhelmed by a lot of poems, but too many words. Sometimes it's very nice because they describe, describe a landscape or something in particular that needs a lot of words. But sometimes in that poem, it's just a one line that actually kills it, and that's what I try to strip the rest and stay with that little one. But maybe I'm losing on something there, but I'm not maybe that good with words.
Yeah. Is there a way to read poetry? Like, if somebody was going to read poetry, would there be any advice you could give them about?
I don't know, to be honest. And again, this question, does the poetry have to be, read or spoken? Is that the thing? So maybe not necessarily. I think a lot of my little poetical thoughts are better just read inside rather than being, what's the word when you read out?
Verbalized.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Orators.
Or yeah, this kind of stuff. So, but then again, some, I've heard some poets reading out their poetry and doing it so well. It's not looking as great on the page, it has to be said. It has to be that emotion, that the energy, movement from the body, the embodied thing that comes with it. And probably not all poetry is the same. So if your poems carry this kind of stuff, that it is you, whether you present something, especially the rebellious ones usually, or maybe something very emotional, maybe that is use your body to do it,
Yeah, because then something can be transmitted in so much with the tone.
Yeah, and there's something transformative personally when you speak your words out loud and you pass it on. There is something happens within you as well, that you express something, and somebody saw you. I think that as humans, like, if we're not seen, for what we are, what we carry inside, we become depressed and isolated and unhappy people. That's part of the thing. We've been doing a lot of men's circles in Galway over the years, and I think the most powerful thing is that you sit in front of someone and somebody just sees you. I see you, right? I just see you. That is sometimes enough. Or you say a few words, it doesn't have to be much, but it's a human thing again.
You've just given me another reason to keep going at this podcast. I've been listening to you talking there. I'm thinking, well, maybe hopefully I can give people the opportunity to be seen in that way, because there's there's a lot of people that have deep, rich lives that they never get to express, you know. And I think that's important. I'm going to have a guest on soon. Well, it'll probably be a month or two away. And he's living an extraordinary life that I don't think people understand. But I'm going to read a quote from Heidegger. I've sent you these questions, so you know the quote that's coming. But I have another Heidegger quote that you won't know about. But Heidegger is somewhat of a controversial philosopher, given that he attached himself to the Nazis, but he was a very main figure in Western philosophy, especially around the 20th century. So it goes as thus: man acts as though he were the shaper of language, while in fact, language remains the shaper of man. If this is true, how does poetry shape us differently to analytical scientific type language?
Yeah, I think it still goes back to this signpost. I think. Yeah, I think it goes back to this feature of being able to remind us of something. You know, like the taste of the strawberry. Like there are no other ways of doing this by just poetry. I think. You know, there's places within us that poetry can reach in a very easy way compared to anything else.
Yeah.
I'm sure other arts can express something else too and point us there. But you know, words. I think the words are so powerful, right? Like you really have, like there's no question humans are run by language, and so that observation. You know, I'm wondering about the essence of the observation about Heidegger is the one thing, but it's an obvious thing that the words impact the way we live. You know, the way they're spoken. You know, you can say the same word in one way or the other, and it will change your life in one way or the other way. You know, if you have a wife, you probably know. Sometimes thank you is a different. It's a different thank you.
You have to get the tone of it correct.
So that's the thing, you know. But you see, yeah. And again, I think we spoke about, you know, where do we get the meaning of the words, and you know, a lot of that meaning comes from the past, and many people created meaning around it. You know, where in literature it happened, and what did it, you know, what happened there. Yeah.
So we come into the world, and this language is already here. But yet that's all we have to describe the world around us, to describe ourselves to ourselves in our internal dialogue.
Yeah.
So the creation of ourselves is kind of built with blocks that were here before we got here.
Yeah.
We didn't make the language.
And you also mentioned that you know, the uniqueness of Irish language, maybe in the way it expresses things differently than English language, and this is, I think, one of the things with the language learning models or whatever, the chat GPTs and stuff. I mean, it seems like the goal is to have a universal language that this thing can just put the text in and just spits out the translation in another language. But I don't think it's possible.
Well, I think it's forgetting that language is a metaphor. Language is not reality. Language is a metaphor for reality. And so when we think that, or when ChatGPT thinks, if thinking is the correct word there,
that is correct.
That it has an absolute perfect view of reality because it knows it through words. I think there's a lived experience. There's a being that's not caught up there in GPT.
Yeah, well, this is it, and I think there's I'm gonna refer that you gave me some questions before, and you were talking the last questions that you know that I think was something about post-apocalyptic type of stuff.
Yes,
Yeah, something like that.
Well, that's the question that I ask everybody at the end of the podcast. But you're happy to go for it now. And the question is, if we were to write a story about what it is to be human, for humanity, post-apocalyptic humanity, and you could put in one sentence, what might that be?
Oh, yeah.
You can fire away with that wherever you were going.
Yeah,
before
I will. But that's got me thinking a little bit now. I think, in essence, being a human is beautiful experience, and it's not always easy, but it's not. It's so unique in this universe that I think it's worthwhile, to experience it. So that would be maybe something around that lines.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking, if that goes to this, if it goes with the civilization and all this machine run world, like Matrix type of stuff, I was thinking that, the all these LLMs, those chat GPTs, they don't have experience of being a father or a loving child as a mother, or having a brother or a sister, or breaking a hand falling off a tree, or the disgust when you put a first hook on first worm on the hook when you go fishing, like we experienced that yesterday with my little boy. That they don't have that. So when I see, when I'm caught up trying to clean up my house and spill milk, and it's something with some music or poetry would come from the machine about some fancy stuff. Um, I think it should be different way around, no? They should be cleaning, the machine should be used for those cleaning things. And rather than that, it's taking over that content creation, which we humans, are, that's what it learns on. And what's so beautiful about our existence. And I think you like Sam Harris too, to listen to
I
it
listen to some
sometimes.
Harris Rock,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think he talks about all these times that we live in now. And he talks about artificial intelligence. So that he talks about the revenge of humanities. That, because what's left, coding is, we're not going to be good at coding. We're not going to be good at, constructing and running big farms. AI could probably do it so far. But that's the humanities, the things that we experience as humans and can do as humans. And that should be that's what we could focus on at least.
Yeah, I like that, and I think I've said it somewhere before that I think ChatGPT and the way we were talking about analytical philosophy and the way that there's clear lines around the world in their meaning. I think AI will probably do that better too. But the continental, the poetic, the creative philosophy, it will not do that better because, like we said, it hasn't had the meaning.
It doesn't touch the world.
It doesn't touch the world. So
Yeah.
how can I put signposts like that?
It's empty inside in a way,
Yeah, it is.
We can talk about forever if machines can ever become conscious and all this, but as it is for now, like whatever you see on that screen, it's emptiness. It looks good, but
It's so persuasive.
it is, isn't it? Yeah.
It's like, and I know, like I think its most common usage is for psychological advice to people, therapeutic advice, and I do wonder about that. I don't doubt that it gives much good advice because really it just collates all the common knowledge, but it gives some very bad advice and it hasn't had the lived experience. Doesn't know the tone.
It's good.
that
It's
been
good at
spoken.
listening, though, and that's what we humans in this world very often do not have patience anymore. Even in relationships, just like listen, because it doesn't have any agenda to anything than just listen and respond. So you give it, an hour of listening, and they will respond after an hour. But with the humans, you lose your you lose your patience, or you get hungry, or whatever. So maybe that's why it's so powerful as well to people who have nobody, to talk to.
That's true, but isn't it kind of it's created that desert? I mean, our technologies really have created that desert of human contact. They've I heard a hippie lady say once, and really struck me that every break in human connection becomes a gap in the market for capital. So it's actually incentivized. So it's actually incentivized to break up human relationships because it can mediate then and get paid and up GDP and all. You know what I mean? So I feel like these technological advances have created a lot of gaps in human connection, and now it's been filled by ChatGPT that we're talking to for our loneliness. And I'd rather we approached another cure for loneliness than give each individual an AI to talk to. But that's not to say they're not helpful in these individual instances. I'm sure they are. I'm sure they give people some a sense of help, a sense of belonging. Maybe I don't know, but I do have issues of
Yeah, but yeah, like what was the movement in the past? Luddites? The Luddites, have
I've
you
been
heard of
called a
them?
Luddite so many times.
Yeah, yeah. So I think there's a space for that now. I think there's a lot of young people trying to go back, but this is it. Let's remain human. Let's write poetry. You know,
Yeah.
let's paint. Let's like
Yeah.
you can't always like tools are great, but like let's not mistake tools by something that is we're supposed to do ourselves and enjoy. I don't know.
Yeah. I think what people forget about the Luddites, and as I said, that like I've been getting out about social media since about 2014, 15, and I was called a Luddite and a machine breaker a few times, and that, and my comeback used to be, and I guess it still is, that the Luddites weren't actually against progress. The Luddites were against the jobs that were being lost, the machines that were being used were making it easier for people to be repressed and oppressed by the capitalist owners of these machines. So it wasn't about the machines, it wasn't about anti-progress. It was like, well, let's make this progress work for everybody. And I think that kind of idea is very important now that we have the centralizing of control of our language, control of our information sphere. Seems to be so concentrated in these few small.
And you see, we
areas of
could
technology.
continue this conversation for very long, but I suppose there's a lot of people probably listen to you would like to have that kind of conversations. There's not many spaces, and I think you joined recently the Philosophers Hat Club.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, so there is a space just for everybody to know that
Tell
you
us
can
more about the Philosopher's Hat Club, because I've joined it recently, and honestly, it's been wonderful. It's enriching.
It's a space for conversation like that, but in maybe a little bigger group, and we explore philosophy of them on a different idea. I'm always inspired by different, like even you talking about Ludwig's now, and this, I'm thinking maybe that could be a topic for the next session or something. But every month we discuss something completely different. And somebody said recently that it is that people come to this club with their ideas, not in a clenched fist, but with an open hand.
Yeah.
So we share the ideas and we're trying to think deeper about stuff. Let's not finish conversations on the initial thoughts, but go a little beyond and challenge each other a little bit, but in a friendly manner. So it's a club online that we meet once a month. That's what it is. And,
The lovely, beautiful man that said that quote. I don't want to name him, but he's got a bravery to his kindness.
Yeah.
In that he's willing to fight for his kindness.
Yeah,
it's
and poetry is his weapon.
And poetry is his weapon.
He every time we meet for the last so many years, there's always some kind of poem quoted by him in every session or afterwards. And I think that gave me actually a bit of courage to publish those poems as well for that reason, because I thought, poetry has its place, and especially in thinking philosophically and the thinking poetically has its own dimension.
It can open up a space. Can't it really, poetry? And if somebody wanted to join the Philosopher's Hat Club, how would they go about that?
Just go to creativetogether.ie. That's my website.
Creativetogether.ie. And that's another organization where you do other things. Tell us about what you do there.
This is basically my way of sharing my own passion for being creative, really. Creative together means that we're going to be creative together. So it's through rhythm music or maybe philosophical workshops, philosophical inquiry. I'm also tapping into wellness and well-being, because that was a big passion for me for many years as well. Community work around creating murals or things like that. Everything that we can do creatively to be together. I've noticed I will never be a virtuoso. I will never be the best painter in the world, but I enjoy so much doing different arts, giving a space to others to be creative. And again, in the world where we're so disconnected, those gaps, is to bring people together, because that is the meaningful part, like when you do mosaic together or play music together, it's something that humans we were doing for so long, and brings well-being back to its place.
one of my recent guests said recently, he said, there's too many people in the world nowadays that they don't want to do anything they're not going to be the best at.
Yeah.
It's like, that's such a loss.
Yeah, it's a discouraging thing, isn't it?
We
Especially social
lose out
media.
on doing
Yeah.
so much, and doing things badly is fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many things worth
Yeah.
doing.
Your
than doing
social
badly.
media promotes this kind of thing. If you have to be most beautiful, the best at it, and I think that's what artificial content is. It's just so sharp and perfect.
Yeah.
There's no, even the wrinkles are perfect. It's just I got a slowly an aversion to all this kind of stuff. So what I'm doing with creative thing, it's just you have an organization or corporate or community or school. You want to do something creative that I'm trying to facilitate some creative experience together.
So if there's a group of people around, it can be anything. It can be a
Yeah.
school, it can be a corporation, it can be a pub with all the staff in a pub.
A pint of philosophy.
Pint of philosophy.
Yeah.
And except because there's some
Right
team building about it too. Right? Pint of philosophy. Yeah, but so I will leave a link to Creative Together at the bottom. But I think like most philosophers or maybe creative people, you're not maybe the best at self-promotion. I think I'm there myself. I'm not great at promotion. I love doing the thing, but the promotion of the thing maybe comes a bit harder. So I hope people look into it.
Yeah, that's what it is when you're an artist in anyway these days. You have to be good at everything. You have to be your own, script writer, content creator like yourself. You probably do all this yourself,
Everything.
right? And that takes so much time. And if you
Yeah.
have a family, you have work, and anything outside, it becomes a burden rather than enjoyment. So
Well, I find myself saying sometimes, I say, we here at Philosopheckery, and I'm like, who is this we business? It's just me. But yeah, no. And guys, this book, where could they find this book if they want to?
It's on my website as well, but also in our lovely, friendly bookshop in Westport, Tertulia. I think it's tertulia.ie, if I'm not mistaken, has copies of that to order. Just a handful of you just to support, I suppose, myself and my family.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much,
Lukasz. Thank you for doing this. It's been a privilege, and anytime I've ever spoken to you, I've come away with signposts, for more to think about, for more to reflect on and look inside me. So I hope you've given the people listening here some signposts too, and maybe you'll be back someday.
All the best.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.